So, here we are. Last we met, we were talking about the invasion of Poland. Now, part of the non-aggression pact that the Soviets signed with Germany was that, yes, we're not going to attack one another. Hitler doesn't want to open up a two-front war, which is what he believed do the Central Powers in World War I. So he signs this non-aggression pact. We're buddies, pals. But what they're doing is they're kind of shaking on it. Hitler and Stalin are shaking on it. They've got their hands behind their backs, fingers crossed. They don't really mean it. They're just going to wait for the opportune moment to strike. Part of the agreement was Hitler saying, hey, we are going to attack Poland. We attack Poland, you can attack too. And that occurs. When Poland is invaded by Germany on September 1st, 1939, they make great inroads into this state. Then, on September 17th, the Soviet Union attacked. When they attack, they concentrate their forces towards the middle. And the reason they do this, as you see from this bulge here, is that it is a very strategic area. This area of Poland houses the majority of their oil reserves. Hitler will always need oil. We'll see in a minute that he is going to make a decision that is going to cost him, and it's because he seeks oil and not a victory. So when Stalin invades here, and he makes sure that he concentrates his forces in the middle so that they would seize those oil-producing areas. So even though Hitler and Russia both agreed to divide Poland, they did not agree to divide it equally. Stalin, from there, will be able to, or continues to invade these three Baltic states here, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and by June 1940, controls them. Now remember, Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, had secured a deal with Hitler that said he was not going to take any more land. We had his signature on this piece of paper. Chamberlain came back and said, peace in our time. I have achieved peace in our time. Well, Hitler, his signature wasn't worth the piece of paper he wrote it on. He didn't care about it. You know what? If you think that me writing on a piece of paper is going to keep me from doing what I want, more power to you. But when it came time for it, he didn't plan to honor his word. Chamberlain's government falls, and a new government would be formed under Winston Churchill. Now, when Poland is attacked, England and France go to war against Germany because they had a treaty with Poland that said they would do this. The United States is still neutral. We have those neutrality acts which say that we are neutral in thought and deed towards everybody. We're not involved in this thing. But FDR realizes that that's really not the case. Syria really kind of side with England. We have what Churchill is going to say, a special relationship with them. And as a result, we want them to be kept afloat. So what happened is he gets the Neutrality Acts repealed in regard to dealing with war munitions. Instead of us taking war material and putting them on ships and sending it over to England, we are going to only allow any nation, we're going to allow any nation to come over to the United States, buy our goods, pay cash, no credit, and then we will send it. And then they must take it with them, right? Your cash and carry. You come over, you pay cash, and you take it yourself. We are not going to get pulled into this war by one of our ships getting torpedoed by a U-boat. Not going to have that happen. Now, at the same time, to kind of illustrate how far this isolationist trend goes in the United States, an amendment is introduced to the Constitution that is known as the Ludlow Amendment. The Ludlow Amendment, if it had passed, would have taken power to declare war away from Congress and given it to the people. The only way a declaration of war could be given would have been by a popular nationwide vote. Now, you can imagine that would be a nightmare. If you don't get 51%, you're not going to. Every nation would walk over. Thankfully, it failed. Congress has the authority to declare war. It's a good example of how much the United States wants to stay out of it. With the successes in Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, Russia is going to invade Finland, which is right here in that northern western border with Russia. They're going to invade, and when they invade, they expect it to be very easy. They invade in the summer, and they Stalin supplies the Russian soldiers with everything they need for a very short-term war. By that I mean they go to war in short sleeve. Finns are much harder to defeat than they expected. The Finnish people engage in guerrilla warfare against the Soviets, and soon winter comes. Now, as you can imagine, tanks in winter do not work very well. Tracks on ice is not the best thing. And when you are only armed or you're only clothed with short sleeves and it's freezing, you're not going to be as effective. The Finns would attack many times on skis, then ski away, oftentimes setting traps where the Soviets follow them. They would ski into an open field, which looks to be an open field for a man on skis when a mechanized couple 100-ton tank goes over this open field. It turns out to be a lake. The ice cracks and the tank falls through, killing the soldiers. Now, this makes the Russians very mad, and they begin to torture the captured Finns that they find. The way they torture them is they make them stand still while men throw water on them. As they throw water on them, it's freezing cold weather, they slowly freeze to death. Throw water on you, your clothes freeze, your skin, but you're still alive. Many times men were frozen into blocks of ice as they were tortured. Eventually, the Finnish do surrender. Finns do surrender. And but not before they had inflicted 250,000 casualties against Russians with an army of only 25,000. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they were able to slow the Soviet advance for a while. Gives you a good idea about how the Russians concerned their enemies. Now, between the conquering of Poland and the net strike by Hitler, it's going to be 6 months. And this time period is known as the Phony War. Because what has happened is Hitler has invaded Poland, Soviet Union has invaded Poland, France has moved forces to their border with Germany, and the United Kingdom has moved forces to that border as well. For the next 6 months, they kind of just stare at each other. It's called Phony War. It's called the Sitzkrieg, because all they do is they sit. It's the war in which they just sit and stare at each other. Then on April 9th, 1940, Hitler launches the Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg means lightning attack, lightning war, in which motorized tanks drive at full speed into Denmark. Denmark falls almost immediately. Norway falls within the month. From there, Hitler turned and invaded neutral Belgium and the Netherlands. The Allies are going to move their forces from being up here along this line to over here along Belgium, because it looks like Hitler's coming this way. Now, France fully expected Germany to attack them again someday. As a result, along their border, they built what was known as the Maginot Line. What is known is still there. It was a massive concrete and steel construction. Turrets, walls, barracks, man bases, tunnels, underground bunkers, you name it, that stretched the length of their shared border. It went all the way. To an area known as the Ardennes Forest. It stopped there. The reason it stopped there was because they believed that there was no way on earth that Germany would be able to take a mechanized division through the tangle of the Ardennes. So they didn't build anything. The only problem? That is exactly where Hitler planned to go. And on May 10th, 1940, they invade. Now, Maginot Line has often been called the shield for France's army was the sword. Now, how many guys when you were growing up played with a shield and sword? Anybody do that when you were growing up? Okay, I dealt with my kids all the time. Nerds really big into stuff. You got a shield and you got a sword. Now, if somebody comes at you with the sword, what are you going to do? You're going to block it with the shield. And what happened is in warfare, when somebody hits you like that, they're extended and they've left themselves vulnerable. The goal here with the Maginot Line was to be the shield to take the brunt of Germany's first strike. And then while they are attacking the Maginot Line, France's army would be able to sweep around and hit them when they were vulnerable. Now, I told you last time we met that France's army was the largest in Europe in 1936 when Hitler started the army. By this point, they're still large. They're not as large as the army. What happened is because they have repositioned themselves away from the Maginot Line, when Hitler comes through, he has cut off the French and the British protecting Paris, capital of France. And as a result, all Hitler has to do is just go straight down to Paris, and Paris falls. Paris falls on June 22nd, 1940. Now, Hitler, I told you a while back, end of the last lecture, on to something we'll come back to. And we're coming back to it. Hitler had been planning for this moment for 20 years. He saw the beginning of Germany's trouble beginning in a small town in France called Compiègne. And in Compiègne, when World War I came in, deciding as the army, the German leadership was taken into a rail car, very luxurious rail car, in which they were then dictated the terms by the French and the British. Well, Hitler, deciding to make wrong right, had his men track down that very train car, take it to the exact same place that it had been in Compiègne in 1919 when the treaty was signed, and brought the French forces, the French leaders, to that train car. When they walked in, it wasn't the victorious Allies that they faced, but Hitler. Hitler was on the other side of that train car. They walked in and he dictated terms. When he dictated terms, he said, "You have been defeated. Your army has been defeated, and they will retire from the field. And a new nation is created, that of Vichy France." Vichy is a southern community in France, and it is going to be allied with Germany. France has been defeated. So France's forces has been defeated, but what about the British? The British are still caught between two German forces. The German forces coming from Belgium and the German forces that came through the Ardennes and swept north. All that it would take to destroy the British army was for them to slowly move north. Churchill was not about to allow his men to be captured. And at the Battle of Dunkirk, while they are fighting for their lives, the British are fighting for their lives, he orders every single ship in the United Kingdom that is able to cross the channel between London, United Kingdom and France to go to sea, pick up every single British soldier they could. In the end, 300,000 are evacuated. Now, this angers Hitler quite a bit. He easily defeated French, and he was expecting to easily defeat British as well, but yet they escaped. He is then going to turn his attention to trying to bomb London into submission. Starting in June of 1940, the Battle of England, which actually never gets to England, is going to be waged by the British, by the Germans against the British. Now, using the same type of tactics of air power that was used in attacking Poland, the Germans are going to find it a little bit more difficult to attack the British. See, the British have this new invention as a state secret that nobody else knows about. Well, the United States, and we have it as well, but they not, and it's called radar. What does radar help you do? Help you see things far away from your eye to detect. So what happens is when a ship or a plane takes off Germany or France, now those aircraft, and flies over across the English Channel, it's going to be exposed for 20-25 miles. Those planes were detected by British radar system, and planes were sent to intercept them. As a result, what would happen is a British plane could take off, go, attack, come back, land, refuel, and attack again because they have accurate data on where those planes will be. This attack lasts 6 months. Instead of breaking the will of the British to attack, the British to be engaged in this war, it actually strengthened. No war has ever been won by air power. That is that is fairly new maximum. Air power has been won in war of the world. Now, with the war in Europe fully at play, we are going to see the return of the submarines, the Untersee boats. The Untersee boats are going to be Hitler's vehicle of choice because for the amount of money and the amount of men it requires, it provides an amazing return of investment on how much damage it can do. Because Hitler concentrated in U-boats and not battleships, he has quite a few dispersed wolf packs throughout the Atlantic. This poses an interesting dilemma for Churchill. He does not have the Navy that enough ships to control the borders of Europe, while at the same time protecting the convoys coming from the United States of needed supplies. Therefore, he appeals to Churchill. Churchill appeals to FDR and says, "I need some deal. We need some way for you to help us." He is trying his hardest to get the United States to go to war. Germany. See why in a minute. But FDR's hands are tied. We cannot give them money. We cannot give England money because of the Johnson Debt Default Act. It said, if you defaulted on your war debt to us, which England did, you will not be able to, we will not be able to give you more money. So we could not give them more money. So what FDR decides to do is he says to Churchill, all right, here's the deal. We will give you 50 destroyers that are old, obsolete, last year's technology. In exchange for you giving us 6 ports in the Atlantic Ocean for us to house our navy. House our navy, our ship. Right? Churchill jumps at it. He gets 50 ships, and the United States gets 6 ports like Bermuda, Fountain, Bahamas, Antigua, Trinidad. Now, what happens here is that with these, what naval ships are our military ships, our Navy, are they always in port? No, where are they? They're rarely in port. A ship that's in port is a ship that's not training. Where are they? They're usually on mission. They're usually out on training. They're usually out to sea. So what happens is instead of having here is our border and our ships going out a little bit, we now have bases to headquarter out of that we can go further out east. So through this destroyers for ports deal, we are going to extend our control of our half of the Atlantic Ocean to about a third of the distance. England's going a third of the distance. We're going a third of the distance. And all that's missing is this middle third that is not being controlled. September 1940, Congress is going to pass the first peacetime draft. We're not going to war, but we can kind of see that events are taking us that way, and it's better to be prepared than caught unaware. And in 1940, when it is passed, the first peacetime draft calls for and succeeds in getting 1.2 million soldiers drafted. They're not going to be trained and ready to go to war yet, but they are slowly being drafted. Also in 1940, FDR took the two-term tradition and stepped down. Yes? Two-term tradition says that FDR can only serve 2 terms and he steps down. Every president since Washington is abided by the 2-term tradition. Yes? Yes. But is it a law? No. And FDR violates. He says that it is more important for the United States to have a president who is not learning the job for 6 months to a year when war comes than honoring a old tradition. So the 2-term tradition is violated by FDR. He says war is coming. Whoever wins the presidency, Republican or Democrat, there's going to be a 6 month to a year gap in which they are learning everything that he knows now. And he can't do that to the Americans. But what happens is the Democrats renominate. And he runs against the Republican Wendell Willkie from Kansas. Although it is a closer election than 1936, FDR easily wins re-election. With his re-election secured, he turns his attention to providing more assistance to the Allies. After the election of 1940 is done, FDR is contacted by Winston Churchill, and Churchill says, I have to be straight with you. England we are bankrupt. We have nothing left. We need your help. The problem again is that Johnson Debt Default Act. says we cannot lend money to someone who has who had reneged on making their payments of war debt of World War I. And because the United States is still very much isolation, we are, well, FDR is unable to get enough votes to repeal it. Therefore, he sets his sight on going around it. And in doing so, he issues what is known as the Lend-Lease program. The Lend-Lease program provides up to $7 billion to be used to give England and the forces of France that are still fighting $7 billion, whatever they need. Now, he would take to the radio to explain himself. And he puts it this way. He says, listen, this is like me being at home and my neighbor's house is on fire. I go outside, I see my neighbor's house is on fire. I can wait for the fire engine to come, or I could go and get my hose that is right there. And I could give him the hose. So here is my hose, take it, fight fire. I do not say to him, here's my hose, I pay $25 for it, give me $25 while his house burns. That's not going to be a good thing to do. That's not very neighborly. So what happens, says, is I give it to him freely, knowing that when it is over, the fire's out, he will return it to me. And if the hose is unusable, we'll deal with that later. At the same time, at the same radio address, he outlined what is going to be the United States War aim. And this is called the Four Freedoms. He said the democracies are fighting against tyranny of fascism for four things. And these are the four freedoms that every democracy should strive for. The first freedom is that of speech. You have the freedom to say what you want without fear of government reprisal. The second is fear of worship. Freedom of worship, fear of worship, that's great. Freedom of worship. You have the right to worship however you wish. No government will prevent you from worship. You have the freedom from want. You have what you are. You have the ability to get what you want, and your government should not tell you that is something unavailable to you. And finally, every citizen has the freedom to be free from fear. You should not fear your government. So these four freedoms are what's going to become the United States war aim. Now, with Hitler having so much success in Europe, Mussolini's getting a little bothered by it. But wait a minute, he's having all this success. I'm not getting anything. So he decides that he's going to attack Greece and Egypt. And in October of 1940, he launches Italian forces invade Greece, and they invade Egypt. In Greece, they try to take it over to conquer territory. In Egypt, their goal is to take British control of the West. It's not long for the Greeks and the British in both those areas start turning the tide against the Italian invasion, and it looks like both invasions are going to be a disaster for Mussolini and Italian forces. Hitler is going to be very upset because he has to help his ally out and send in German forces that preparing for something else. Greece is going to be defeated in April 1941, not by the Italians, but by the Germans, and Yugoslavia will be defeated at the same time. Mussolini's kind of like the big brother that isn't as talented as the little. Okay? It's hard to deal with when you're the big brother. Mussolini's been around longer than Hitler. Mussolini was kind of like the godfather of fascism. But yet Hitler is the one who's getting all the successes, and it bugs him. Of course, Hitler's not too happy that he has to convert troops to go and save Italy. In Africa, Hitler is going to dispatch a man who's going to become his greatest general. His name is Erwin Rommel. The reason he is dispatched to the North Africa area, theater of war, is because a British general by the name of Richard O'Connor is going to destroy the Italian army. Richard O'Connor had less men, had less vehicles than the Italians. But on the day of the assault, he decided to use those disadvantages against the Italians. What he did is on every tank, jeep, vehicle he had, he removed them up. And then he tied a 2x4 behind each vehicle to drag in the dirt as they drove towards the battle. Now, if you're in the desert and you're driving on sand and you have a board behind you, what is it going to do? It's going to stir up dust. Now, usually one vehicle is going to stir up dust. If you have something flapping around behind you, it's going to stir up more dust. If you're in the distance, you see this, what's going to happen? You're going to expect the assault to be much greater than it actually is. If you hear vehicles without their mufflers, the exhaust noise is substantially louder. When the assault comes, the Italian forces are completely destroyed. After the Italians surrendered, those who survived, British troops walked into the area, they fought, and would find many instances in which men, Italian soldiers, sleeping in the desert, you can imagine it's hot, many of them slept naked, would be found dead at their machine gun post, completely naked because they were surprised from the assault, facing the wrong way. The confusion was that great. That was how great O'Connor's trick was. As a result, Rommel is dispatched to try to save what remains of the Italian forces, and at the same time try to take Suez Canal as well. We'll talk more about him as we get further. He is known as the Desert Fox because of his great victory here. Rommel, yes. Erwin Rommel. Talked a little bit about the U-boat earlier. You remember during the Spanish Civil War, Germany provided the revolutionaries with war material. One of the war materials, one of these things that were provided were submarines. So what happened at the start of World War II is that the Germans have veteran troops for their submarines, something they did not have, something that the British would not have, French would not. And learning from the successes in World War I, they learned to have these troops travel into the submarine travel in packs. One would detect, would spot a convoy coming, and they would radio to everyone else, and they would converge on the location and attack. They were especially successful. They hunted in the Middle Atlantic that was not controlled by the British, or on the British side of the ocean, or on the American side of the ocean. Now, I told you that Hitler did not spend all of his money on building big battleships. However, he did spend some of it. Two ships that are going to be well known time period is the Bismarck and her sister ship, Tirpitz. Now, the Bismarck, at the beginning, at the beginning of the war, was the largest ship ever afloat to that point. She would later be outclassed by Japanese ships, but we'll get there in a bit. Have any of you guys ever seen a battleship? Two battleships. Okay. If you've been to, what did you see? Okay, so you've been to Pearl Harbor, you saw the Missouri, and you also saw the Arizona. So, the Arizona, what else? Who else? Okay, where at? Pearl Harbor? Okay, Pearl Harbor, okay. We're going to use the Arizona example. When you go, and if you guys have ever seen Pearl Harbor, you know what I'm talking about. You've got the white thing in the middle of the ocean. On basically, what you don't understand if you actually get there is that when you're there, the white memorial straddles the width of the Arizona. The Arizona stretches out on both sides. You can see, when you're standing on it, you can see a buoy in the front of you that is marks the front bow, and you can see a buoy in the back that marks your stern. The Arizona was 600 feet long and 97 feet wide. Okay? The Bismarck was 823 feet long and 118 feet wide. The Bismarck had 8 15-inch guns, 12 5.9-inch guns, 16 10-inch. She was a monster. She had made a name for herself when she had destroyed the flagship of the British. And on May 24th, 1941, she was trying to get from Baltic Sea into the Atlantic. Here at Battle of Denmark Strait, she would encounter on May 24th, 1941, the HMS Hood, and the Hood would be defeated, but not before they launched a little biplane. This little biplane, Swordfish, would launch a torpedo, and then that was the only arm it had. It had a pontoon, fly, went back. But they thought that it may have hit Bismarck. They couldn't tell. The Bismarck got away. The next day, well, not the next. Next day, Churchill issues an order saying that if the Bismarck gets into the Atlantic, there will be no stopping her because there is nothing that can face her. So he orders every British ship in the area to attack Bismarck. He is very famous. Ordered all British ships to sink Bismarck. So all British ships try to find Bismarck. They discover her on the 27th of May, 1941, and she's out in the Atlantic. What she's doing is that Swordfish had launched a torpedo that had hit her rudder, and so she was stuck steaming in circles. These circles were 1,000 miles wide, the ocean, and she was going in circles. So on the 27th of May, she would be attacked and sunk by the HMS Ark Royal. Because this massive ship was destroyed, Hitler would never allow her sister ship, Tirpitz, to come out of port. It was too expensive. This is another reason why Hitler is going to concentrate on submarines and not battle. With his frustration of being unable to attack and defeat England, Hitler is going to make the greatest mistake of all. That is, he's going to break that non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. On June 22nd, 1941, he invades through Poland into Russia. At the beginning, it is an overwhelming success. In a few weeks, they are within 50 miles of Moscow, the capital of Russia. They're so close that a scout is able to see the spinnerets, things that look like turnips, on the top of the Kremlin, the Capitol building of Moscow. That is how close they are. However, Hitler is more concerned with coming down here in what today is Ukraine. The same reason Putin wants Ukraine today is the same reason Hitler wanted it in 1921, and that is Caucasus Mountain oil reserves. Vast amounts of oil reserves. If Hitler was able to take this area, the Ukraine, he would be able to have enough oil for anything he wanted to do. Rest more. Now, those of you that had me in History 1301 know that this thing happened very similarly in 1850 with Napoleon. Napoleon invaded Russia. Who defeated Napoleon's forces in 1850? Let me phrase this. What defeated Napoleon's forces in 1850? It was the winter. To defeat the Russian army, not the Russian winter. As a result, the same thing that happened to Hitler's army, Napoleon's army, happens to Hitler's army. There's going to be a massive loss of life just due to freezing. The tremendous cold out there. In addition, Hitler makes a very major blunder. The fact that he uses the same tactics, or his generals use the exact same tactics that worked in Poland in Russia. Drive the citizens out onto the out of their houses and into the road. Then when the forces come through, they will have to fight through the retreating citizens into the invading force. Problem is, in Poland, there were paved roads. Russia, there was not. So when the cold comes in, the cold seeps in, Germany, which is using for most of its supply trucks, a device called the half track, has regular car wheels in the front, but a track in back to give it propulsion, is going to find themselves with a problem. What happens on an unpaved road when it gets wet? It gets muddy, it gets slippery, okay? And then it freezes. And then a big vehicle goes over, it's sludge, right? Kind of like junk, kind of piles outside. Here's the problem with half track. A half track is the back track, the track on the back, is constantly moving, right? You give it gas, it moves, right? It is up to the driver in the front, wants to go to the left, to turn left. When it turns left, the vehicle on the road goes left. If those front tires are in mud, or in sludge, or on ice, it continues to go straight. So as a result, their progress, once the snow and the ice set in, is substantially slower. Now, it's supposed to take 6 weeks. It's going to take quite longer. It's going to be several months. Eventually, in this attack, Hitler would lose 250,000 men killed. He would suffer 500,000 wounded. He would lose 2,093 planes and 2,758 tanks. So that's a lot, right? Okay. Stalin loses 802,191 soldiers, 3 million wounded, 21,200 planes, and 2,500 tanks. There was a movie a while back with Jude Law called Enemy at the Gates, in which he plays a Russian sniper. In this movie, they show him going to war at the very beginning. And what happened is the men are about ready to go and defend Stalingrad. And the commanding commanding officer gives the guy in front of Jude Law a rifle. Says, "Here's your rifle." And then he turns to Jude Law and says, "Here's a magazine, a bullet." And he says, "Where's my rifle?" He says, "He's got it." When he is killed, you take his gun, and then you go forward to fight. That was their definition of fighting. You go forward, and they're not going to train you. You go forward and fight. When you die, someone will pick up your rifle, and then they will continue to fight. That is the way they fought. Also, when we get to the end of World War II, the Russians were able to make so much progress than we can, because we are concerned with human life. We were not. Now, April 1941, the United States is going to extend, they call their neutrality control of our destroyers to Iceland. Will protect convoys up to Iceland. In August of 1941, Churchill and FDR are going to meet in Newfoundland to discuss what is going to be considered the Atlantic, what we call the Atlantic Charter. And this sets out war aims for England and the United States. Even though we are not going to war, we are signing an agreement that says when we finish the war, we will have these, this is what we will do. This is what we will do to Germany. Soon after, 15 more nations would sign it, including the Soviet Union. Basically, it's war aimed to the United States. Even though we're not going to war, we're not planning on going to war, we see that war is getting closer to enveloping us, and that it is going to be something that we need to be prepared for. We like to think that the United States entry into World War II occurs with war. And it is true, once that occurs, we would go to war with Japan, and then Germany declared war on us. But those aren't the first ships that are attacked and sunk. During our neutrality patrols in the later half of 1941, we would have 3 ships that would be engaged by U-boats. On September 4th, 1941, the USS Greer would be attacked off of the coast of Iceland because they detected a German U-boat and were trying to alert a anti-submarine base headquartered at Iceland, which location. German U-boat tried to sink Greer, but she escaped. On October 17, 1941, the USS Kearney is summoned to help a Canadian convoy that is being attacked by a German U-boat. She would drop depth charges, which are basically underwater bombs. You guys have ever been in a pool underwater when somebody jumps in and does a cannonball in your vicinity, you know that sensation of being rocked and thrown around? That's kind of what a depth charge is. A bomb that is given a certain depth, blow up at. And basically its goal is to sink a submarine. It is something to use the water pressure created by the explosion to crush the hull of the submarine, to sink it or do so much damage that it's forced to surface, which is the case like any other. The Kearney was dropping depth charges to try to protect a Canadian convoy when she gets attacked. The only one that is sunk is the USS Reuben James. The USS Reuben James is going to be sunk on October 31st, 1941. She is sunk when Captain the Reuben James places the destroyer between a U-boat and a British convoy. A torpedo meant for the German, torpedo meant for the British convoy hits the Reuben James instead. She sinks. Now, the end of October, FDR insists that the Neutrality Act be modified to reflect the reality of the situation. Slowly heading into December, he would see some movement in that regard. However, things are going to change substantially early, and it is going to occur in an area that he did not expect. Well, excuse me. He expected, but not as quickly. That is going to be, of course, the Pacific Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. So, with that, take your pen, draw a line. Exam 3 ends here.